Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The last Harry Potter movie was released in 2011 and the final book even earlier. However, many fans are still not ready to say goodbye to their beloved characters. They eagerly want to know more details about the magical world and seize every opportunity to spot plot inconsistencies in the stories created by J.K. Rowling. Interestingly, J.K. Rowling herself has answered some of the most debated questions. Today, I offer to explore a few of these examples. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Why didn't Dumbledore's portrait help Harry in the search for Horcruxes? One of the most discussed questions regarding the final part was why Dumbledore's portrait, which was supposed to offer wise advice even after his death, didn't guide the Golden Trio on where to find the Horcruxes. J.K. Rowling explained that the portrait is not an exact replica of the person, but merely a projection. It reflects only the knowledge and wisdom that were available in Hogwarts, as well as the information Dumbledore shared with his image. If Albus never told his portrait about the Horcruxes, then the portrait could not help Harry and his friends. Number 2. How much does it cost to study at Hogwarts? Some enthusiasts decided to calculate how much studying at Hogwarts might cost, including accommodation and other expenses. The result was about $43,000 per year. If you multiply that by 7 years, it comes to over $300,000, a hefty sum, both in Muggle terms and in galleons. However, J.K. Rowling quickly clarified that, in reality, education at Hogwarts is completely free for the students' parents. The Ministry of Magic covers all expenses except for books, wands, and other small items. Number 3. Can an animagus choose the animal they turn into? The answer to this question is clear. No, they cannot. If a wizard could choose the animal they turned into, everyone would be lions, cute puppies, or majestic eagles. For example, Peter Pettigrew probably didn't dream of becoming a rat, though in some situations this might be useful. The animal a wizard turns into depends directly on who they are as a person. However, there is a small clue, their Patronus. For example, James Potter's Patronus was a stag, and that is the animal he transforms into. Minerva McGonagall's Patronus is a cat, and she transforms into a cat as well. Number 4. What does the Hufflepuff common room look like? The Hufflepuff common room was the only one Harry never visited, and thus fans were curious about what it looked like. According to Rowling, she had planned to show all the common rooms but couldn't find a fitting moment for Harry to visit the Hufflepuffs. Rowling described the common room as cozy, resembling a hobbit's dwelling. It is accessed through a tunnel that leads into a small room with a low ceiling. The room is decorated in yellow and black tones with honey-coloured wooden furniture and numerous plants, some of which brush against the hair of those passing through. Number 5. Did Petunia really hate her nephew that much? Throughout Harry's life, his relationship with Aunt Petunia was complex. She showed no love for him despite being his closest relative. J.K. Rowling admitted that Petunia didn't actually hate her nephew. She had desperately wanted to become a witch, but was angry when she realized that would never happen. She then married Vernon, the most vehement Muggle hater imaginable. Nevertheless, deep down she cared for Harry, as shown by the fact that she kept the blanket in which he was brought to her. Number 6. Did Neville Longbottom's parents recover? After Frank and Alice Longbottom were sent to St. Mungo's Hospital, suffering from the effects of the Cruciatus curse, fans hoped that over time they might recover. However, J.K. Rowling dispelled these hopes. She explained that despite fans' wishes, the damage caused by such dark magic is irreversible. In a sense, what happened to Neville's parents was far worse than what Harry's parents went through, and their health can never be restored. Number 7. Why did Fred Weasley have to die? The death of Fred Weasley in the Battle of Hogwarts remains one of the most heartbreaking moments in the Harry Potter series. Fans were devastated by the loss of this vibrant character who had brought so much joy and humor to the story. Many questioned J.K. Rowling's decision, asking why it had to be Fred, not another Weasley, who met such a tragic end. Rowling admitted that killing Fred was one of the hardest decisions she ever made. She confessed that she cried as she wrote the scene, but, as she explained, Fred's death had a deeper purpose. It was meant to show the true cost of war. The death of Fred, who represented pure joy and love for life, was meant to illustrate the harsh reality of conflict, Rowling said. Losing such a beloved character helped to emphasize the gravity of the battle and the sacrifices made. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Fred's death stands as a stark reminder of the devastation caused by Voldemort's war. It was a tragic moment that struck readers to their core, forcing them to realize that victory over evil comes at a tremendous cost. As George Weasley stands by his twin's side, the sorrow of losing half of the Weasley duo is palpable. The world had lost its laughter, Rowling wrote, highlighting how deeply Fred's loss affected not just his family, but everyone who loved him. Number 8. Why wasn't Hermione sorted into Ravenclaw? Hermione Granger was undoubtedly one of the brightest witches of her generation, a girl with unparalleled intellect. Yet, despite her brilliance, she was sorted into Gryffindor, the house known for its bravery rather than its scholars. Many fans wondered, given her exceptional intelligence, why she wasn't placed in Ravenclaw, the house renowned for its intellectuals. J.K. Rowling explained that the Sorting Hat didn't choose Hermione solely based on her intelligence. It also took into account her values and priorities. Despite Hermione's extraordinary academic ability, what truly mattered to her were qualities like friendship, courage, and honesty. These values aligned more with Gryffindor than Ravenclaw. As Rowling said, Hermione's courage and loyalty were the key qualities that influenced the Sorting Hat's decision. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, we see the Sorting Hat's internal struggle when deciding where to place Hermione. It was clear that her intellect could have placed her in Ravenclaw, but it was her heart, her deep loyalty to her friends, and her strong moral compass that ultimately made her a perfect fit for Gryffindor. The Sorting Hat even said, "You could do well in Ravenclaw, but I think you belong in Gryffindor," recognizing that her bravery and commitment to doing what was right would define her time at Hogwarts. Number 9. What happened to Umbridge after Voldemort's defeat? Dolores Umbridge became one of the most despised characters in the Harry Potter series. Her cruelty, her abuse of power, and her unwavering belief in her own superiority made her an enemy to many. However, after the final battle at Hogwarts, her fate remained unclear, leaving fans to wonder what happened to her. J.K. Rowling explained that Umbridge received the punishment she deserved. After Voldemort's fall, she was arrested, tried, and sent to Azkaban for her crimes against Muggleborns and her many abuses of power during her time at the Ministry. She was held accountable for the suffering she caused, particularly during her time as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor and later as the Ministry's appointed headmistress. As Rowling revealed, she never repented for what she did, and she remained convinced of her own righteousness until the end. Despite the terrible things she did, Umbridge's story ended with no redemption. Unlike many other characters who found some form of change or growth, she remained obstinate in her beliefs. Even in Azkaban, the place for the most dangerous and unrepentant criminals, she held on to her sense of superiority, still convinced that she had done what was right. Number 10. Why couldn't Harry see Thestrals before 5th year? One of the mysteries in the books was why Harry Potter couldn't see the Thestrals until his 5th year. He had witnessed his parents' death as an infant and had even seen Professor Quirrell die. Yet Harry was unable to see these skeletal winged creatures until Later, J.K. Rowling clarified the reason behind this. To see Thestrals, a person must truly understand and internally accept the concept of death. Harry couldn't remember his parents' death because he was too young at the time. As for Quirrell, Harry didn't fully grasp the reality of the professor's death. He hadn't processed it as a personal experience, so it didn't allow him to see the Thestrals. It wasn't until Cedric Diggory's death that Harry truly understood the finality of loss. After Cedric's death, something inside Harry changed. He had witnessed someone his age, someone real and full of life, lose everything. He felt the weight of it, and for the first time, he truly accepted what death meant. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Rowling described the moment Harry finally saw the Thestrals. He saw them, these strange creatures pulling the carriages. Their skeletal bodies were black as night. This was a turning point for Harry. Once he acknowledged death in a way that only someone who had truly lost could, he could see the Thestrals, creatures that had always been there but had been hidden from his view. It was a quiet but powerful reminder of how the acceptance of death can change the way we see the world. Number 11. Why was Voldemort incapable of love? Lord Voldemort, throughout the entire series, was a figure devoid of love, compassion, or friendship. His inability to feel any of these emotions was striking, and readers were left wondering, why was he so fundamentally lacking in ordinary human feelings? J.K. Rowling explained that the answer lay in Voldemort's own origins. Tom Riddle, later known as Voldemort, was born as a result of a love potion. His mother, Merope Gaunt, used the potion to conceive him with Tom Riddle Sr., a man who never loved her. The love potion that created him cast a shadow over his entire life, making him incapable of feeling love. This tragic detail in Voldemort's backstory helps explain why he was so cold and disconnected from human emotions. Rowling wrote, Voldemort's inability to love was his greatest weakness. This fact not only shaped his character but also reinforced his sense of isolation. He could never understand the bond between Harry and his friends, nor the power of love that protected Harry throughout the series. The absence of love in his life made Voldemort not just a villain, but someone who was permanently broken, unable to form genuine connections. The tragedy of Voldemort's life is profound. The lack of love from the very moment of his conception left him emotionally stunted. It was this emptiness that drove him to seek power and control, believing that these would fill the void. But no matter how much power he amassed, he remained incapable of understanding what it truly meant to love, making him a figure of profound loss as much as one of evil. Number 12. Why didn't Harry die in the Forbidden Forest? One of the most discussed moments in the final book is when Harry willingly walks into the Forbidden Forest, ready to face death at the hands of Voldemort. In that moment, it seemed inevitable. Voldemort's killing curse, the Avada Kedavra, struck Harry. But, unexpectedly, Harry did not die. Fans were left wondering, why didn't the curse kill him? J.K. Rowling explained that Harry was protected by the blood of his mother, Lily. Her blood ran through his veins, and after Voldemort's resurrection it also flowed in his. This unique and unintended bond, a blood kinship, tied Harry to life. As Voldemort cast the killing curse, it was only able to destroy the part of Voldemort's soul that had been living in Harry, the Horcrux. This revelation, which came in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, helped fans understand that Harry's survival wasn't a simple twist of fate, but a result of the powerful magic Lily had passed on. Rowling described the moment when Voldemort struck Harry. The curse did not destroy Harry, it destroyed the part of Voldemort's soul within him. It was not Harry's life that was at risk, but the fragment of Voldemort's soul. This coupled with the sacrificial magic of Lily's love, was what ultimately kept Harry alive. It wasn't just the blood protection, but the purity of a mother's love that shielded him from death. It was a magic Voldemort could never understand, something that went beyond his dark powers. In this moment, Harry's survival was not a mere twist of luck. It was the culmination of years of sacrificed love and the battle between good and evil. As Harry stood there, seemingly on the brink of death, he unknowingly carried the deepest protection, the magic of a mother's love, which Voldemort had never understood and could never break. Number 13. Why didn't Draco Malfoy become a Death Eater before 6th year? Despite the Malfoy family's close ties to Voldemort, Draco did not officially become a Death Eater until his 6th year at Hogwarts. Fans were puzzled by this delay, especially given how deeply involved his father Lucius was with the Dark Lord. Why hadn't Draco joined earlier, as many might have expected? J.K. Rowling explained that Draco was protected by his parents for a long time. Lucius, despite his public loyalty to Voldemort, did not want to pull his son into the true darkness of the Death Eater's world. Lucius had a soft spot for Draco and wished to shield him from the horrors of that life. But everything changed when Lucius failed Voldemort during the events surrounding the prophecy. His fall from favor left the Malfoy family vulnerable. In his rage, Voldemort decided to punish Lucius by assigning Draco a mission that was nearly impossible: to kill Albus Dumbledore. This task was a cruel test. It was not just a matter of loyalty, but of life and death. Draco was forced to face the unthinkable: murder the headmaster, a figure he had long respected. Draco, however, was not ready for that kind of darkness, Rowling admitted in interviews. Draco's internal struggle is evident in the 6th book, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, as he contemplates his mission and grows increasingly desperate. The turning point comes in the final confrontation, when Draco hesitates, unable to carry out the act. In that moment, Draco's character is shaped. It's clear that while he was raised in a family that admired power and control, Draco would never be able to follow in his father's footsteps. He had never been a killer, Rowling wrote, and in that he found his true path. The burden of the task made him realize that he didn't want to become the monster Voldemort demanded. Draco's journey wasn't just about resisting the darkness, it was about finding the courage to reject it completely. Number 14. Why did Snape become headmaster of Hogwarts? When Severus Snape was appointed headmaster of Hogwarts in the Deathly Hallows, many fans were perplexed. Why would such a figure, one who had been a loyal Death Eater under Lord Voldemort's command, be given such a powerful and important role in the magical world? Snape was no stranger to the dark side of magic, and his previous actions had left him deeply mistrusted by many. His appointment as headmaster was a topic that sparked great debate and confusion among readers. Yet the reasons for Snape's appointment, as explained by J.K. Rowling, go far beyond what was immediately apparent to the characters in the story or the readers themselves. Snape did not seek the position for personal gain. Instead, his role was one of secrecy, sacrifice, and protection, all orchestrated by none other than Albus Dumbledore. Snape's tenure as headmaster was steeped in tension. His cold, aloof demeanor and the dark aura that surrounded him made his leadership seem both oppressive and suspicious to the students and faculty of Hogwarts. The school, already fractured by the rise of Voldemort and the increasing control of Death Eaters in the Ministry of Magic, was now under Snape's rule. It wasn't just the students who feared Snape. The staff, too, felt uneasy, uncertain of his true loyalties. But what many failed to realize was that Snape's appointment was a masterstroke in Dumbledore's final plan, a plan to protect the school from the very threat that had already begun to consume it. When Dumbledore asked Snape to take the post, it was not out of trust in Snape's ability to lead the school in a traditional sense. Instead, it was a strategic move to keep Hogwarts protected under the most dire of circumstances. At the time, Voldemort's power was growing, and his Death Eaters had infiltrated many parts of the wizarding world, including the Ministry of Magic. The presence of someone with such direct connections to Voldemort in a position of power at Hogwarts allowed for much-needed access to the inner workings of the enemy's plans. Dumbledore knew that Snape's reputation as a former Death Eater would place him in a position to monitor and control the Death Eaters who had already wormed their way into the school, particularly the Carrows, Alecto, and Amicus, who had been appointed as professors of the dark arts and Muggle studies respectively. Snape's role as headmaster was not a position of comfort, but a burden, one that he carried with an unparalleled sense of duty. He was a man torn between two worlds, the world of darkness, where he had once served Voldemort, and the world of light, where he had sworn to protect the students of Hogwarts in honor of his love for Lily Potter. Snape's primary task, unbeknownst to most of the school, was to safeguard the students from the very same Death Eaters who were working to dismantle the resistance to Voldemort's rule. To many, Snape's cold exterior and harsh disciplinary actions seemed a reflection of his true nature. But behind his intimidating persona, Snape was driven by a far more complicated mission, one which had been laid out by Dumbledore himself. Dumbledore, whose death was part of the very plans Snape was enacting, knew that Voldemort's obsession with Harry Potter would eventually lead to a showdown that would determine the fate of the wizarding world. But even before that moment, Dumbledore had foreseen the need for a strong, strategic protector within Hogwarts, someone who could stand firm against the growing threat. He had come to trust Snape, not only because of Snape's commitment to defeating Voldemort, but also because he understood that Snape had a deeper connection to the battle than anyone else could see. By appointing Snape as headmaster, Dumbledore was placing a highly skilled and dedicated spy in the perfect position to influence the inner workings of the school. While Snape had to maintain the appearance of loyalty to Voldemort, his true allegiance was always with the Resistance. Dumbledore, in his wisdom, knew that Hogwarts was not just a school. It was a symbol, a place of resistance, and a final bastion against Voldemort's rise to complete power. What was happening at Hogwarts would eventually echo throughout the entire wizarding world. The Carrows, in their brutal tactics, represented the embodiment of Voldemort's regime within the school. They enforced rules designed to break the spirit of the students and instill fear in every corner of the castle. Their presence only heightened the atmosphere of dread that had already begun to permeate the walls. Snape, however, was no fool. He knew that while he needed to keep up the appearance of a harsh headmaster, he also had to protect the students from the Carrows' excesses. This delicate balance was something that Snape navigated every day, constantly walking the line between his role as headmaster and his true mission to undermine Voldemort's control. Snape's actions in the school were not without consequence. To many, he appeared to be a tyrant, and his use of fear and intimidation was seen as just another form of oppression. The students, particularly those loyal to Harry Potter, had every reason to despise him. But through it all, Snape remained steadfast, carrying out the wishes of Dumbledore even after his mentor's death. It was Snape's strength of character and his unyielding loyalty to Dumbledore's plan that ultimately allowed the resistance within Hogwarts to endure, even as Voldemort's grip tightened. Number 15. Why didn't Hermione restore her parents' memories right after the war? The question of why Hermione Granger did not immediately restore her parents' memories after the war has lingered in the minds of many readers. It's a question that J.K. Rowling herself addressed directly, explaining the complex reasoning behind Hermione's decision. Hermione's choice to erase her parents' memories and send them to Australia to keep them safe during the battle against Voldemort was one of her many acts of courage and selflessness throughout the series. Yet, when the war ended and Voldemort was defeated, Hermione didn't immediately undo the spell. This decision puzzled many readers, as one would expect the bright, determined Hermione to swiftly restore her parents to normal. However, the truth is far more nuanced than it may initially appear. Hermione's decision to delay restoring her parents' memories was not due to a lack of love or care for them. In fact, the opposite is true. After all, she had gone to great lengths to ensure their safety during the darkest times of the Wizarding War. However, the restoration of their memories was not something that could be rushed, as Hermione was all too aware. She had used a powerful memory charm, one that was so strong that it not only erased their memories but also replaced them with entirely new ones, convincing them that they had never had a daughter. This was not a simple charm like a temporary forgetfulness spell, but a deep, life-altering enchantment. The spell, which Hermione had cast in the 7th book, was done out of pure love and protection for her parents. The wizarding world was at war, and Voldemort's forces had no qualms about attacking the families of those who opposed them. Hermione, knowing that she was in danger and might be targeted by Death Eaters, made the painful decision to sever ties with her parents for their safety. She wiped their memories clean and sent them to Australia, convincing them that they had never had a daughter in order to protect them from Voldemort's wrath. In a world where witches and wizards had to constantly live in fear of exposure, Hermione's actions were both brave and heart-wrenching. It was a sacrifice of the highest order, showing her maturity and understanding of the dangers she and her loved ones faced. When the war ended, however, and Voldemort was vanquished, Hermione was faced with a dilemma. On one hand, she could easily restore her parents' memories, bringing them back into her life. On the other hand, there was the problem of the complexity of the magic she had used. Memory charms, particularly ones as strong and invasive as the one she had placed on her parents, were not simple to reverse. Hermione, who always prided herself on being methodical and cautious, knew that undoing such a powerful charm without care could result in disastrous consequences. The idea of unintentionally causing harm to her parents was something Hermione could not bear. In an interview, Rowling revealed that Hermione did not want to rush back into her parents' lives without being absolutely sure she could safely reverse the spell. Hermione was a deeply responsible person, Rowling explained. She wasn't just going to walk in, wave her wand, and expect everything to be fine. She had to make sure she understood the ramifications of the magic she had cast. Restoring her parents' memories was not a light task. It was a matter of their identity, their memories, and ultimately their mental health. Hermione, ever the meticulous planner, took her time studying the intricacies of memory charms. She knew that the process wasn't just about lifting the spell, it was about ensuring that her parents would be able to adjust to the return of memories that had been erased. Memories were not just facts, they were the foundation of identity. What Hermione had done was to erase her parents' very identity, and she knew that restoring that could be traumatic if not handled with care. To Hermione, this was not just a matter of simply casting the reversal spell. Her parents had lived for months without the knowledge of their own daughter, living a false life in Australia, completely unaware of the danger that had loomed over them. What would it mean to bring them back into the world they had once known? Would they be able to cope with the sudden rush of memories? Would they feel violated or confused by the process? Hermione did not have all the answers, and so she hesitated, understanding that this delicate situation required thoughtful consideration. It wasn't until she was certain she could undo the charm in a way that would preserve her parents' well-being that she felt ready to act. The responsibility Hermione felt toward her parents' emotional state was rooted in her understanding of the lasting effects that magic could have on the mind. She knew that magic could be incredibly powerful, but it was also dangerous if not approached with respect. Memory spells, while common in the wizarding world, were not something to be taken lightly. Hermione had already experienced the consequences of magical mishaps, whether it was her own struggle with the Time Turner in her 3rd year or the disastrous events that arose from their use of magic during the war. She was acutely aware that even well-intended magic could have lasting side effects. This knowledge made her cautious and careful in her decision to restore her parents' memories. Number 16. Why didn't Voldemort try other ways to achieve immortality? In the complex tapestry of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter universe, one of the most haunting and intriguing questions has always been about Lord Voldemort's obsession with immortality and his method of achieving it. Fans have often wondered why, despite the existence of the legendary Philosopher's Stone, which could grant eternal life, Voldemort didn't pursue this path. Instead, he chose the far darker, more painful route of creating Horcruxes, an act that required not only murder but a deep corruption of the soul. Why did he not simply seek the stone as Quirrell had tried to do? The answer, provided by Rowling herself, offers a glimpse into the psychology of a character defined by pride, arrogance, and an overwhelming lust for power. Rowling explained that Voldemort's rejection of the Philosopher's Stone was rooted in his intense need for control. The stone, created by the alchemist Nicolas Flamel, was a magical object that could provide immortality, but it was created by another person. The very idea that Voldemort's continued existence would depend on the work of someone else was anathema to his philosophy. Voldemort was not merely seeking to live forever, he wanted to dominate life and death itself. To him, immortality achieved through the stone would represent a form of weakness, a reliance on someone else's magic, someone else's ingenuity. When Voldemort began his quest for immortality, his main obsession was not just to escape death, but to bend it entirely to his will. He sought ultimate dominion over life, something that could only be achieved through the Horcruxes. These objects containing pieces of his soul allowed him to split his essence and anchor it to the world, thus ensuring that he could never truly die. Unlike the stone, which offered a temporary solution to mortality, the creation of Horcruxes was a more permanent and terrifying form of immortality. Each murder Voldemort committed, each piece of his soul he tore away, was an assertion of his will over death itself. The creation of the Horcruxes was not just an act of self-preservation, it was an act of domination, something that the stone could never fulfill. The moral consequences of this act were not lost on Rowling. The Horcruxes, she explains, represent the ultimate rejection of life, of the natural order. By fragmenting his soul, Voldemort was not just evading death, but also denying the sanctity of life itself. The stone, on the other hand, could grant eternal life without the profound consequences Voldemort was willing to endure. But to Voldemort, the idea of using such a shortcut, relying on an object created by someone else, was deeply unsatisfactory. He could never admit that there were ways to live forever that did not involve his own ingenuity and mastery. His pride was as immense as his fear of death. Moreover, Voldemort's pride extended beyond just a personal need for power. It was rooted in a deep, almost pathological need for supremacy. The act of creating Horcruxes was a way for him to claim complete mastery over the forces of life and death. He was not interested in just surviving. He wanted to rule, to have everything and everyone at his command. Through his Horcruxes, he was able to secure his physical form against death's grasp, but it came at an immense cost. Each murder he committed, each soul he ripped apart, added to his growing darkness, slowly warping his humanity. The concept of immortality through Horcruxes was so intrinsic to Voldemort's identity that he could not conceive of any other form of life beyond death. The very thought of depending on a stone, a magical object, seemed beneath him. He could not fathom using something that had been created by another wizard, and so he dismissed the Philosopher's Stone as beneath him. This is not just about the mechanics of magic, it's about control. For Voldemort, the ultimate control came from being the architect of his own immortality, even if it meant sacrificing his soul and humanity in the process. This psychological profile of Voldemort, carefully drawn by Rowling, is one of the many layers that make his character so complex. It is not just his ambition or his desire for power that drives him, it is his obsessive need to be the sole author of his fate, no matter the cost. This is why he ultimately chooses the painful, dark path of creating Horcruxes. The stone, while capable of granting him what he wanted, would have been a mark of weakness, a sign that he was not entirely in control of his own fate. In the Harry Potter books, Voldemort's quest for immortality is not a quest for self-preservation, but for absolute mastery. His soul, torn apart piece by piece as he created each Horcrux, became a symbol of his complete rejection of natural law. He believed that by creating Horcruxes, he could defy nature itself, that he could control life and death as he saw fit. To him, any method that involved relying on another's invention was unacceptable. The Philosopher's Stone, while an effective tool, was simply another form of dependency, and Voldemort could never allow himself to be dependent on anyone, least of all a person like Nicholas Flamel, whose very existence was a reminder that immortality could be achieved through another's skill. Number 17. Why didn't the Horcrux inside Harry sense the others? In the world of Harry Potter, magic often bends the rules of reality, but even within the magical world, some questions leave readers scratching their heads. One such mystery has puzzled fans for years. Why didn't Harry Potter feel the presence of other Horcruxes after all? A part of Voldemort's soul was lodged within him, and if souls have any connection, shouldn't Harry have been able to sense the other Horcruxes, or at least the ones closest to him? This question was raised repeatedly by readers, and it was one that J.K. Rowling herself addressed with clarity and insight. When Rowling spoke on this matter, she explained that the fragment of Voldemort's soul that lived within Harry was not a fully functioning part of a person's soul. It was, in essence, a shadow, a sliver of Voldemort's true self, but one without independent consciousness. Voldemort, a dark wizard consumed by power, created these Horcruxes not as sentient parts of himself, but as magical fragments designed to anchor his life to the mortal realm. Each piece was meant to ensure his survival by keeping part of his soul in places far from his body, thus granting him a kind of immortality. But the part of Voldemort's soul that found itself in Harry was not the same as those in the other Horcruxes. It wasn't alive in any meaningful way. It wasn't capable of thought, emotion, or awareness. Harry's connection to Voldemort wasn't even something Harry himself truly understood until much later. He had no knowledge of the dark soul fragment inside him, no hint that he was linked to the very source of his greatest enemy's power. He only became aware of his connection to Voldemort through the pain of his scar and the occasional visions that haunted him. This was not a shared bond of comprehension, but a violent, intrusive magic that existed only as a burden to Harry. It wasn't a full piece of Voldemort's soul, just a fragment that lived dormant within him, unable to do anything other than feel the emotions that Voldemort felt. That was why Harry could not sense the other Horcruxes. The idea that a Horcrux could feel or detect another was, as Rowling clarified, a misconception. While these pieces of soul were deeply tied to their creators, they weren't actively aware of each other. Voldemort's true soul, fragmented as it was across different objects, never knew that Harry was carrying a piece of it. It was only the dark wizard's desperate thoughts and anger that occasionally made Harry aware of the link. The fragment inside Harry wasn't conscious enough to feel anything. It didn't know about the other Horcruxes. It couldn't. It had no autonomy. It was simply a magical tether that existed for Voldemort's purposes and for Harry's torment. Rowling emphasized that this fragment of soul was more of an anchor, a tether to Voldemort's existence than a functioning part of his identity. Harry, without realizing it, was carrying around an object that was more like a magical bomb than a sentient being. The Horcrux within him did not feel the pain of the other Horcruxes being destroyed, nor did it sense when they were nearby. It didn't recognize them as part of Voldemort's master plan. In this sense, the piece of Voldemort's soul inside Harry was the equivalent of an object, not an active participant, in the larger struggle that was being waged. This idea was most poignantly demonstrated during the climactic moments of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Harry discovered the true nature of his scar and its connection to Voldemort. He learned that the Horcrux in him was the key to understanding his bond with the Dark Lord. Yet even then, Harry's understanding was limited. His scar burned whenever Voldemort felt strong emotions, but he didn't know why this happened until much later. He had no comprehension that a fragment of Voldemort's very soul was lodged inside him, shaping his thoughts and actions to some degree. The soul fragment inside Harry was not a living, breathing extension of Voldemort's will. It was simply a prison for the Dark Lord's life force, which lay dormant until Voldemort could once again possess Harry's body. It was this lack of consciousness that separated Harry from the other Horcruxes. Voldemort's other Horcruxes, such as the locket, the cup, or Nagini the snake, were imbued with dark magic and were therefore more potent in their evil influence. Yet they weren't sentient either, not in the way a person might be. Each was a piece of Voldemort's soul but couldn't interact with the world outside of its physical container. Just as Harry couldn't sense these objects, they couldn't reach out and recognize him as the bearer of a piece of Voldemort's soul. They were, at best, passive instruments of Voldemort's dark power. Throughout the series, Harry is burdened by his connection to Voldemort, but this link was not some magical thread that extended between the Horcruxes. Rather, it was a one-way connection, Voldemort's soul fragment to Harry. Harry felt Voldemort's rage, fear, and lust for power, but the reverse was not true. This allowed for one of the most tragic aspects of Harry's journey. While he fought Voldemort and sought to destroy him, he was also unknowingly preserving a piece of him. He was carrying a part of his greatest enemy within him, a fact that made his ultimate victory all the more poignant. The absence of any real feeling in the Horcruxes also sheds light on another key aspect of Voldemort's nature: his inability to truly care for anything. He had no true love, no empathy, no understanding of the people he used and manipulated throughout his life. This lack of empathy is reflected in his treatment of his Horcruxes. He never considered that the pieces of soul inside them might have some form of awareness. Each fragment was a mere tool in his quest for immortality, and as Rowling noted, they didn't have the power to feel anything in return. In the end, Harry's triumph over Voldemort was not just about physical strength or courage, but about understanding the nature of Voldemort's power. By carrying the Horcrux within him and choosing to sacrifice himself to destroy it, Harry effectively rendered Voldemort powerless. The key to Voldemort's destruction was not just the physical destruction of his Horcruxes, but also the realization that they were not living beings. They were magical objects, the sum of dark magic and evil intent, but not capable of the emotional complexity or awareness that Harry himself possessed. Harry's eventual choice to destroy the Horcrux within him, to let Voldemort's piece of soul die, symbolizes the breaking of the cycle of violence and terror that Voldemort had created. Harry, unlike Voldemort, could never see a part of his soul as expendable. For Voldemort, the Horcruxes were means to an end, a cold and calculated strategy. But Harry's willingness to die, knowing that he carried the last fragment of Voldemort's soul, revealed that the true strength of his character lay in his ability to understand and sacrifice something Voldemort could never comprehend. The question of why Harry didn't feel the other Horcruxes comes down to the fact that the piece of Voldemort's soul within him was not a complete soul, and thus it had no awareness or magic to perceive the others. It wasn't a conscious, active participant in the conflict that was unfolding. It was merely an anchor, a tether, waiting for the day when Voldemort would rise again. But by the end of the series, when Harry destroyed the last fragment within him, he proved that love and sacrifice are far more powerful than any piece of a shattered soul. Number 18, why is Ginny barely in the spotlight? J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series has captured the hearts and minds of readers for over 2 decades, creating a world where characters come to life in the minds of fans. Among these characters is Ginny Weasley, the youngest child and only daughter in the Weasley family. Despite her pivotal role in the final books of the series, many fans have expressed frustration over what they perceive as a lack of focus on Ginny in the earlier parts of the saga. Some readers feel that she deserved more screen time, more emotional depth, and perhaps a more direct involvement in the central narrative, especially considering her importance in the final books. This critique led to a particular moment when Rowling, reflecting on Ginny's arc, addressed these concerns head-on. Ginny Weasley, as described by Rowling, evolves as a character over the course of the series. Her growth is subtle, incremental, and deeply intertwined with the development of the larger narrative. In the beginning, she appears as a shy, somewhat insecure girl, overshadowed by her brothers and overshadowed by the grandeur of the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Ginny is a character who often finds herself in the background, quietly supporting her friends, yet this does not mean that she lacks significance. Rowling, in her responses to readers' critiques, explained that Ginny's development was not meant to be immediate or flashy. Rather, it was designed to reflect the natural growth of a young girl who would eventually become the fierce, self-assured woman seen in the later books. One key element of Ginny's character arc that Rowling highlighted was her gradual emergence from her insecurities, particularly after the trauma she endured in the Chamber of Secrets, when Tom Riddle used her to reopen the chamber and control the basilisk. This harrowing experience left a lasting mark on Ginny, but it also served as a turning point in her character. Ginny's emotional and mental growth post-chamber is crucial. The event catalyzes her transition from the timid girl who once blushed in Harry Potter's presence to the confident young woman who would eventually become Harry's wife. Rowling stated that she deliberately chose not to make Ginny a perfect cover girl who would steal attention right from the start. Ginny's strength was not intended to be immediately visible, but rather something that would emerge as the story progressed. The key to understanding Ginny, as Rowling emphasized, lies in her resilience and her gradual maturation. Ginny grows through her struggles, whether it's dealing with her crush on Harry, the trauma from her possession by Tom Riddle's diary, or her evolution as a talented and confident witch. This growth, though not always in the foreground, was designed to reflect a deeper realism. Ginny wasn't intended to be an instant heroine, but rather someone who worked through her fears, learned from her experiences, and became stronger and more independent with time. In fact, Ginny's character growth was subtly set up in the earlier books, though it may not have been as pronounced as that of the central trio. For instance, In The Chamber of Secrets, Ginny's transformation from a nervous, love-struck girl to a survivor of great evil provides a quiet but important foundation for her eventual role in the story. While many readers may have been distracted by the more obvious plot lines and characters, Rowling had already begun to lay the groundwork for Ginny's significance. Despite her initial invisibility in the story, Ginny's resilience and eventual strength become clear in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Here, she emerges as a central character in her own right, actively participating in the fight against Voldemort's forces. It's also in this book that Ginny's romantic relationship with Harry finally blossoms. But even this relationship is rooted in something deeper than just a whirlwind romance. Rowling made it clear that Harry's feelings for Ginny were not the result of sudden infatuation or passion, but rather a gradual development based on mutual respect and admiration. Harry's growing affection for Ginny reflects how she has matured from a shy girl into a strong, capable young woman who earns Harry's respect as much as his love. In The Deathly Hallows, Ginny's character is fully realized, and she plays an instrumental role in the final battle against Voldemort. Her bravery and determination are no longer just traits of a secondary character, but attributes that make her indispensable to the cause. While she may not have been at the center of the narrative in the earlier books, her contribution to the defeat of Voldemort is undeniable. She, along with the other members of the Weasley family and the Order of the Phoenix, becomes a key figure in the fight for a better, safer world. Through Ginny, Rowling demonstrates the theme of growth as the quiet, shy girl from the beginning of the series transforms into a fierce and formidable witch who is an equal partner to Harry in their shared fight for the future. One of the most compelling aspects of Ginny's character is the fact that her growth is not rushed. Unlike Harry, who is forced into a leadership role from the moment he learns of his magical heritage, Ginny's journey is one of inner strength and personal discovery. Rowling's decision to allow Ginny to grow gradually speaks to the complexity of her character, showing that true strength doesn't come from immediate recognition or spotlight, but from enduring challenges and coming out the other side stronger. It's a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't demand attention but earns it over time. Ginny's relationship with Harry also stands in contrast to the often dramatic and turbulent relationships of other characters in the series. For instance, the relationship between Harry and Ginny is grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Harry comes to see Ginny as someone who has her own strengths, someone who is not defined by her connection to him, but by her own abilities and accomplishments. This respect forms the foundation for their eventual relationship, a relationship that is rooted in the shared experiences of their fight against dark forces, rather than the usual teenage tropes of love at first sight or overwhelming passion. Another important aspect of Ginny's character is the way in which she navigates her own path without relying on the approval or validation of others. While Ron and Hermione, Harry's closest friends, are constantly wrapped up in the complexities of their own insecurities and relationships, Ginny is able to maintain a sense of independence throughout the series. She doesn't need to be the center of attention to make her mark. Her actions, particularly in the final books, show that she is capable of standing on her own, even in the face of danger. Her journey then becomes a powerful statement about the importance of inner strength and self-reliance, qualities that are essential to her growth as a person. In many ways, Ginny's story reflects the larger themes of the series: the importance of personal growth, resilience in the face of adversity, and the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. While some readers may have felt that Ginny was underutilized in the earlier books, her gradual development and eventual prominence in the series prove that her character is far from secondary. Ginny may not have been a main character in the traditional sense, but her role in the saga was just as important as that of any other character. Through her, Rowling emphasizes that strength can be found in subtlety, in the quiet perseverance of those who grow and change over time. Ginny Weasley's journey is one of the most profound examples of this message, proving that true power often comes not from being at the center of attention, but from the steady, quiet strength that comes from within. Number 19. Why did Percy Weasley return to his family? Percy Weasley's journey from a loyal son and brother to a young man who chose his career over his family is one of the most complex and poignant arcs in the Harry Potter series. Fans of the series were left questioning Percy's motivations and actions, especially after he distanced himself from his family and sided with the Ministry of Magic during the rise of Lord Voldemort. His eventual return to the Weasley family during the Battle of Hogwarts raised an important question. Why did it take so long? What was it that ultimately brought him back into the fold of his family? In answering this, J.K. Rowling has provided a deeply human narrative about pride, mistakes, and the power of forgiveness. Percy's journey of estrangement began in the earlier books when he, ever ambitious and eager to prove himself, became increasingly focused on his position within the Ministry of Magic. His attachment to authority and his rigid sense of right and wrong led him to believe that aligning with the Ministry during the growing threat of Voldemort was the correct course of action. It wasn't just a personal decision. Percy genuinely believed that the Ministry was in the right. In his mind, the Weasley family, with their growing resistance against the Ministry's stance, was wrong. This ideological divide pushed Percy to sever ties with his family, leading him to a cold and lonely path. The strain between Percy and his family was heartbreaking, particularly for his younger siblings, who looked up to him as a role model. Fred and George, who had always admired Percy's diligence and intelligence, were particularly affected by his betrayal. Their disappointment was palpable, and in the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire, when Percy is absent during critical family moments, it's clear how much his absence is felt. Their relationship became strained, with Fred and George mocking Percy's Ministry allegiance, but beneath that humor there was genuine sadness. For many fans, Percy's actions were unforgivable. They saw him as a traitor, someone who had abandoned his family in their time of need. But J.K. Rowling clarified that Percy was not a villain. He was a misguided young man, full of pride and unable to see the larger picture. In a famous interview, Rowling explained that Percy's estrangement was born out of his youthful arrogance and that his relationship with his family was never beyond repair. Percy's story, she said, is one of mistakes and the learning curve that comes with pride. His insistence on being right, his belief that he was the one with the moral high ground, made it impossible for him to see the mistakes he was making. He was not a traitor in the traditional sense, rather, he was someone who had lost his way. This understanding of Percy's character is crucial in comprehending why his return to the family was so significant. He wasn't just a son coming home, he was a man who had to face the consequences of his actions. When he reappears during the Battle of Hogwarts, his decision to join the fight on the side of his family was both a redemption and an acknowledgement of his past errors. It was not easy for Percy to return, and it was not a decision he made lightly. The years of distance between him and his family had built a wall that he was not sure he could break down. But as the battle raged on, Percy realized that he could no longer stand by the Ministry's misguided path. The battle at Hogwarts was not just a physical one, it was a test of character. Percy's arrival on the battlefield symbolized his willingness to put aside his pride and do what he knew was right. In that moment, he wasn't just fighting against Voldemort's forces, he was fighting against his own internal conflict. The return of Percy to the Weasley family in such a dramatic fashion spoke volumes about the power of forgiveness and the importance of loyalty. As Rowling noted, his return was an emotional turning point, not just for Percy, but for the entire family. While the wounds of the past couldn't be easily healed, the family's willingness to accept him back without question was a powerful message of unconditional love. Fred and George's reaction to Percy's return was one of acceptance, albeit with some skepticism at first. They were deeply hurt by his betrayal, but they had always understood that Percy's pride had been his greatest flaw. It was a flaw that many of the Weasley children, in their own way, had experienced. Percy had always tried to prove that he was better than his siblings, that he could rise above them. This was particularly evident in his relationship with Harry Potter. Percy, in his younger years, had seen Harry as nothing more than a pawn in the larger game of fame and notoriety. He had been dismissive of Harry even when Harry had proven himself to be a loyal and selfless friend. But by the time Percy returned to the family, Harry had grown into a figure Percy could admire, someone who, despite everything, had remained true to his values. In the Deathly Hallows, the significance of Percy's return is clear when he stands alongside his family at the Battle of Hogwarts. Percy's return wasn't just a personal reconciliation, it was an act of courage. By taking a stand against the Ministry, he was admitting that he had been wrong, that the ideals he had clung to were not the right ones. Rowling made it clear that Percy was not a perfect character, but that his flaws made his redemption even more powerful. His return represented the idea that it's never too late to change, and that sometimes it takes a catastrophic event to truly understand what's important in life. Rowling has always emphasized the importance of family and loyalty in her books, and Percy's storyline is a perfect example of how those themes are woven into the narrative. His return to the Weasley family was not just a plot point, it was the culmination of his personal growth. It showed that while family may not always be perfect, they are there to support each other even in the darkest times. Percy's return was symbolic of the way that love and forgiveness can mend even the deepest wounds. He had made a huge mistake, but he had also taken responsibility for his actions. The Weasley family, in turn, showed the world that love is more important than pride or past mistakes. Percy's redemption arc also serves as a reminder of how easily pride can cloud judgment. It's a theme that runs throughout the entire series, from Harry's own struggles with pride and identity to Ron's jealousy of Harry's fame. Percy's pride, however, was different. It wasn't a matter of self-esteem, it was about his need to prove his worth. He had always felt overshadowed by his siblings and had tried to distinguish himself through his achievements at the Ministry. In his mind, aligning with the Ministry was a way to prove that he was right, that he was on the winning side. But as the story unfolded, Percy realized that there was more to life than personal success. There was honor in fighting for what was right, even when it was difficult. Ultimately, Percy's story is one of growth and change. His mistakes were not irredeemable, and his journey shows that people are capable of learning from their past. His return to the family in the final battle was a testament to the strength of family bonds and the power of second chances. Percy's arc is one of the most compelling in the Harry Potter series because it mirrors the complexities of real life. People make mistakes, but they can also change. Percy's story is a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming pride and ego, there is always the possibility of redemption. It was a difficult journey, but it was one that allowed Percy to rediscover the importance of family, forgiveness, and loyalty. Number 20. What happened to Credence Dumbledore? In the world of Harry Potter, some questions are left unanswered, leaving the fans to speculate, wonder, and theorize. But there are also moments when J.K. Rowling, the mind behind the magical universe, breaks the silence and reveals something that has long been a mystery. One of these moments came after the release of the Fantastic Beasts films, where fans were presented with the idea that Credence Barebone, a central character in the prequel series, could be related to the famous Dumbledore family. specifically that Credence was the long-lost brother of the legendary Albus Dumbledore. The question that haunted many after the films was if this revelation were true. Why had no one ever mentioned Credence in the main Harry Potter series? J.K. Rowling's response to this question was not direct. She did not reveal every detail, nor did she provide a straightforward explanation. However, she offered enough information to begin piecing together the tragic story of Credence and his role in the magical world. In a series of statements, Rowling hinted that Credence's fate was, indeed, a tragic one. He had been used as a pawn in a much larger game, manipulated by darker forces, and ultimately he died before Harry Potter's time. This left fans with an unsettling realization. Credence's story was one of sorrow, loss, and secrets that were never to be shared. Albus Dumbledore, the wise and often inscrutable figure in the Harry Potter books, knew about Credence. This revelation came as no surprise to those who had followed the Dumbledore family's tragic history. Albus had lost so much in his youth, including the death of his sister, Ariana, and the broken relationship with his brother Aberforth. The Dumbledore family was no stranger to tragedy, but the addition of Credence to this dark family history complicated things even further. Albus had known about his brother's existence, but the circumstances surrounding their relationship were too painful, too dangerous to explore. Rowling's answer reveals that Credence's story was too tangled in sorrow and secrecy for Albus to confront. The reason Albus remained silent about his brother was not out of shame or a desire to forget, but out of necessity. The magical world at large had no knowledge of Credence, and for Albus it was better that way. The consequences of speaking about him, of confronting the past, would have been devastating, not just for Albus, but for the larger wizarding community. The painful truth about Credence was that he was believed to be dead by most of the magical world. This belief was further reinforced by the years of silence and the absence of any mention of him in any official records or stories. To the wizarding world, Credence was a ghost, a shadow that never existed, and so the tragedy of his life was hidden from view, obscured by time and the machinations of dark forces. This secrecy was a deliberate choice by Albus Dumbledore, who had seen firsthand the dangers of exposing the painful truths about his past. The magic that had bound him to his brother, the curses that had shaped their relationship, and the dangerous individuals who had manipulated Credence. These were all reasons why Albus kept silent. He had already paid a heavy price for the mistakes of his youth, and he would not subject the world to further pain by revealing the truth. The notion that the magical community was better off not knowing about Credence's existence and the tragic circumstances that had led to his fate was a decision that weighed heavily on Albus's heart. Moreover, the story of Credence's life and death also highlights a broader theme in the Harry Potter universe. The idea that many of the most tragic stories in the magical world remain hidden from public view. Whether it is the tortured history of the Dumbledore family, the dark secrets of the Lestranges, or the hidden lives of characters like Remus Lupin, the world of magic is filled with shadows. These shadows are not always brought to light, and often they are deliberately obscured, even by those who know the truth. Albus Dumbledore's silence regarding his brother Credence was not just about protecting the world from the pain of the past, it was also about protecting himself. The wounds that Credence's existence would have reopened were too much for Albus to bear. The guilt, the loss, and the fear that haunted him for years after the death of his sister Ariana were all compounded by the knowledge of his brother's fate. Dumbledore had already made one disastrous choice in his youth when he had sought power and glory with Gellert Grindelwald, and the consequences of that decision had reverberated throughout his life. The weight of Credence's existence was another burden that Albus chose to carry in silence. It was a burden that ultimately led to the dissolution of the relationship between Albus and his brother, Aberforth. The Dumbledore family was fractured, and the secrets they kept were far too heavy to discuss. To speak about Credence would have been to reopen old wounds, and Albus could not afford to do that. Rowling's statements about Credence's tragic fate also shed light on the darker side of the wizarding world. The fact that someone like Credence could be used as a pawn by dark forces like Grindelwald and later manipulated by others in pursuit of power speaks to the vulnerability of those who are lost and forgotten by society. Credence's life was shaped by the forces that sought to control him, and in the end he was discarded, just another tragic casualty in the larger battle for power. It is also important to consider the psychological toll that such a tragic life would have had on Credence. He was a man torn between his identity and the circumstances that surrounded him. Credence was not born a villain or a pawn in someone else's game. He was a person with his own hopes, dreams, and desires, but the dark magic that coursed through his veins, the secretive nature of his family, and the weight of his tragic destiny all conspired to shape him into someone who ultimately met a sorrowful end. The absence of hope, of understanding, of family, these are the things that defined Credence's life. Ultimately, the silence surrounding Credence's existence serves as a reminder that the world of Harry Potter is far from perfect. It is a world of deep mysteries where even the most powerful wizards like Albus Dumbledore are forced to make painful choices. Albus knew the cost of revealing the truth about his brother, and he chose to carry that burden alone. But in doing so, he ensured that the tragedy of Credence's life would never be known, and that the story of the lost Dumbledore would remain hidden in the shadows forever. This tragic fate is not just a story about one man, but about the many lost and forgotten souls in the magical world. It speaks to the complexities of family, the weight of secrets, and the consequences of decisions made long ago. Albus Dumbledore's silence regarding Credence's fate is a reflection of the painful truths that many characters in the wizarding world must live with, truths that are never fully understood by those around them and are often kept hidden for the sake of preserving. What little piece remains? Number 21. Why did Harry forgive Snape? Severus Snape is one of the most complex and morally ambiguous characters in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. From the moment readers are introduced to him, he presents an image of coldness, bitterness, and hostility. As a professor at Hogwarts, he is the epitome of a disciplinarian who is quick to reprimand, belittle, and punish his students. Particularly, his antagonism towards Harry Potter is almost immediate and unrelenting. He ridicules Harry's abilities in potions, favors Slytherins, and even accuses Harry of being an imposter at times. To anyone looking from the outside, Snape is a character that does not inspire compassion or empathy. But as the story unfolds, Rowling reveals the layers of his character, and by the final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Snape becomes one of the most heroic figures in the series. This transformation leads to one of the most profound moments in the entire saga, when Harry forgives Snape and names his own son after him. Many readers were puzzled by this decision, considering Snape's years of torment and cruelty towards Harry. Why would Harry, who had suffered so much at Snape's hands, choose to forgive him? The answer to this question is rooted in a deep understanding of Snape's character, a concept that J.K. Rowling herself addressed in her explanation of the character's actions and motivations. At the core of Harry's forgiveness is his realization of Snape's true nature, something that was hidden from him for most of the series. Throughout the books, Harry's relationship with Snape is defined by hatred and distrust. Snape's cruel treatment of Harry, his tendency to humiliate him in front of his peers, and his unrelenting dislike of Harry's very existence lead Harry to view him as nothing more than a villain. Harry often sees Snape as a representation of everything that is wrong with the wizarding world, a man full of bitterness, prejudice, and arrogance. Snape embodies the worst aspects of authority, and Harry's aversion to him is deeply personal. However, everything changes when Harry learns the truth about Snape's past. After the death of Dumbledore, Harry, in his quest to uncover the truth behind Voldemort's plans, finds himself in possession of Snape's memories. It is here, in the Pensieve, that Harry witnesses a series of pivotal moments that completely reshape his understanding of the man he once despised. Snape's love for Lily Potter, Harry's mother, is revealed to be the key to understanding his actions. In these memories, Harry sees Snape as a young man deeply in love with Lily, who, despite his feelings, was unable to prevent her tragic death at the hands of Voldemort. This revelation is the catalyst for Harry's understanding. Snape's behavior, his bitterness, and his cruel treatment of Harry all make sense in the context of his unrequited love for Lily. Snape had been willing to sacrifice everything, including his own safety and dignity, to protect her son. His actions, though often harsh, were always driven by a singular purpose: to honor Lily's memory and to protect her son, even if it meant enduring years of hatred and misunderstanding from everyone around him. The turning point in Harry's perception of Snape comes when he learns that Snape had been a double agent throughout the war. While Voldemort believed that Snape was one of his most trusted followers, he was, in fact, working secretly for Dumbledore, feeding him information and risking his life to protect Harry. This was no easy task. Snape was constantly in danger of being exposed, and his position as a double agent made him a target for both sides. But despite the personal cost, Snape continued his mission. He was never rewarded for his loyalty, and his sacrifices were never acknowledged by those who he served, including Dumbledore. For Harry, this new understanding of Snape's actions is transformative. He realizes that Snape was not the villain he had once thought him to be, but rather a man who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Snape had been forced to live with his own guilt and pain, having failed to save Lily, and yet he chose to fight for the greater good. He chose to serve Dumbledore despite the personal torment it caused him because of his love for Lily and his desire to protect her son. In doing so, Snape demonstrated a kind of bravery that Harry had never fully understood. It wasn't the bravery of charging into battle without fear, but rather the bravery of enduring years of suffering and remaining loyal to a cause that seemed doomed to failure. This, in Harry's eyes, was the true definition of courage. One of the most significant moments in Harry's understanding of Snape occurs when he comes to terms with the idea that Snape was not the perfect hero. Snape was a flawed, deeply troubled man who had made many mistakes in his life. His treatment of Harry, his bitterness, and his inability to open up to others were all part of his character. But these flaws did not diminish his ultimate act of courage. In fact, they made it even more remarkable. Snape's willingness to sacrifice everything, including his own reputation and safety, for a cause he believed in, is what makes him one of the most courageous characters in the series. Harry's forgiveness of Snape is not an immediate process. It takes time for Harry to fully comprehend the weight of Snape's actions and to reconcile them with the pain and suffering Snape caused him. But once Harry understands the true nature of Snape's sacrifices, he is able to see him in a new light. He recognizes that Snape's actions were driven by love, guilt, and a sense of duty, not by malice or a desire for power. This understanding allows Harry to forgive Snape for the years of cruelty he endured. And in the end, it is Snape's loyalty and bravery that earn Harry's respect. Harry's decision to name his son after Snape is a powerful symbol of this forgiveness and understanding. By naming his son Albus Severus Potter, Harry honors Snape's memory and acknowledges the sacrifices he made. It is a way of showing that he recognizes the complexity of Snape's character and the depth of his commitment to protecting Harry and his loved ones. In this act, Harry affirms that forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but about understanding the choices that led to it. Snape's actions were not perfect, but they were motivated by a profound sense of love and duty that Harry came to respect. Ultimately, Harry's forgiveness of Snape is a reminder of the power of empathy and understanding. It is easy to judge others based on their actions, but true forgiveness comes from understanding the deeper motivations behind those actions. Snape's life was filled with pain, regret, and sacrifice, but in the end, it was his ability to make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good that made him one of the bravest and most heroic characters in the series. Harry's decision to forgive Snape is a testament to the power of redemption and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are, not just for the mistakes they have made. In doing so, Harry demonstrates the strength of character that defines him as a hero. Number 22. Why can't Avada Kedavra be blocked by a shield charm? The curse, Avada Kedavra, is one of the most terrifying and misunderstood spells in the wizarding world, carrying with it not just lethal power, but also the weight of deep, ancient magic. Unlike other curses and charms that are deflected, blocked, or neutralized by various counterspells and charms, Avada Kedavra is unique in its resistance to traditional magical shields. In a question answered by J.K. Rowling herself, the author explained the deeper reasons why the killing curse cannot be repelled by shields like Protego or any other protective charm, a mystery that has intrigued fans for years. At first glance, the rule that Avada Kedavra cannot be blocked might seem like a simple oversight in the magical system of the Harry Potter universe, but Rowling's reasoning goes far beyond mere mechanics of magic. According to Rowling, this spell is not just powerful, but embodies the essence of evil. The magic that powers Avada Kedavra is fundamentally different from other spells because it is rooted in hate, malice, and the unyielding desire to kill. Unlike a spell cast out of necessity or for defense, Avada Kedavra is a dark act, a deliberate choice to end a life without remorse or empathy. The sheer negativity and force of this intent make it almost impossible to counteract by normal magical means. The core reason that Avada Kedavra cannot be blocked by shields or countered by conventional magic lies in its profound nature. Rowling compared it to the dark forces that control death itself. While other spells manipulate the natural world or modify physical objects, Avada Kedavra is a direct assault on life, a curse that exists outside the typical boundaries of magic. The intensity of the evil behind the curse makes it stand apart. It is not simply a spell to be deflected or avoided, it is a death sentence, an irreversible act. This idea is especially prominent when considering how Harry Potter himself encountered Avada Kedavra multiple times during his journey. When Lord Voldemort first attempts to kill Harry as a baby, it is not merely the power of the curse that makes it so lethal, but also the depth of Voldemort's malevolence in casting it. As we learn through the narrative, Voldemort's obsession with power and his willingness to sacrifice anything, even his soul, makes him the perfect vessel for such a curse. His repeated attempts to kill Harry show that the killing curse is not simply a weapon, but a reflection of Voldemort's own soul and his connection to death. What is so remarkable, and often overlooked, is that the killing curse, despite its horrific nature, can be resisted under certain circumstances, by love, sacrifice, and even the very essence of human connection. This is why when Harry faces the curse for the final time, it doesn't kill him as it should have. In the Deathly Hallows, Harry is able to survive Voldemort's curse because of the selfless love and sacrifice his mother, Lily Potter, left in him. The ultimate protection Harry possesses is not a magical shield or barrier, but the protective force of his mother's love, which Voldemort, in his arrogance and cruelty, never understood. The battle between Harry and Voldemort also underscores another key theme in the magical world that Rowling weaves throughout the books: the contrast between magic used for love and magic used for destruction. The Avada Kedavra curse, as a tool of pure evil, stands in stark contrast to the protective charms and healing spells employed by the heroes. For example, the Protego charm, which can deflect spells like Expelliarmus or Stupefy, symbolizes defense and protection, but it lacks the potency to deflect Avada Kedavra. Rowling's answer to this paradox highlights a philosophical point: that no matter how strong a wizard is, no magical defense will ever be able to protect against the most extreme manifestations of evil. The only true defense lies in love and sacrifice, the very things Voldemort sought to destroy. When Harry and Voldemort face each other in the Forbidden Forest, the final showdown is not only one of physical confrontation, but also of ideals. Voldemort believes that strength and dominance are the ways to control life and death, and this belief is reflected in his use of Avada Kedavra. Harry, on the other hand, understands that true power comes from the ability to sacrifice for others, as seen through his acceptance of death in order to protect his friends. This thematic contrast is pivotal in understanding why Avada Kedavra is so unique, and why it cannot simply be deflected by magical means. The final confrontation serves as a metaphor for the conflict between life and death, with Harry representing life and Voldemort representing death, destruction, and the unwillingness to accept the natural order. Harry's survival against Avada Kedavra is not due to any magical shield or barrier, but rather because he has embraced the love and sacrifice that Voldemort never could understand. This final lesson reinforces Rowling's larger message about the importance of love and human connection as the ultimate form of protection. J.K. Rowling's explanation about Avada Kedavra also sheds light on the more subtle aspects of magic in the Harry Potter universe. While it may seem like magic is a tool that can be used and controlled at will, the true nature of magic is often intertwined with the caster's intent. Magic in the wizarding world is not just about waving a wand and reciting words, it's about the deeper emotions and purposes behind the spells. The Killing Curse is a reminder of how far-reaching the consequences of dark magic can be, and why there are no simple solutions when dealing with such magic. It's also worth considering how the magic of Avada Kedavra reflects the larger battle between good and evil in the wizarding world. Just as there are no simple counterspells to such an act of malevolence, the fight against evil in the Harry Potter series is rarely straightforward. Harry's struggle against Voldemort is not just about defeating a dark wizard, it's about understanding the deeper forces that drive him and learning how to fight those forces with something far more powerful than magic: love and selflessness. The idea that Avada Kedavra cannot be blocked by shields also adds a layer of dramatic tension to the story. In many other magical confrontations, the characters rely on their ability to create protective barriers to defend themselves from curses. However, the presence of Avada Kedavra in the narrative reveals that there are some forces fueled by pure hatred and evil, that cannot be shielded against, emphasizing the fragility of life and the inevitability of death. It forces the characters, especially Harry, to face their own mortality in ways that they would not have had to otherwise. Finally, Avada Kedavra serves as a reminder of the costs of unchecked power and the devastating consequences of magic when used for evil purposes. In the hands of someone like Voldemort, it becomes a symbol of his twisted vision of power, a power that seeks to control life and death, to dominate others through fear and destruction. Harry's ultimate victory is not just a triumph over Voldemort's magical abilities, but over the very idea that power can be used to control the most fundamental aspects of existence. The fact that the killing curse can't be blocked by a shield is a fitting representation of the strength of evil in the wizarding world. Yet, as always in Rowling's universe, the true power lies in the love and sacrifice that transcends it. In the end, Avada Kedavra is more than just a deadly spell. It is a powerful narrative device that underscores some of the most important themes in the Harry Potter series, including the conflict between good and evil, the power of love, and the limitations of magical power. The inability to block this curse with a shield highlights the truth that some evils in the world cannot be easily avoided, and the only true defense against them lies in the strength of human connection and selflessness. Number 23. Why didn't Voldemort have a Patronus? The question of why Lord Voldemort, despite being the most powerful dark wizard of his time, could not produce a Patronus has intrigued many fans of the Harry Potter series. While Harry Potter and other wizards are able to summon this protective, magical creature, Voldemort, the embodiment of evil, never attempted such a spell. According to J.K. Rowling, there is a simple yet profound reason why he couldn't summon a Patronus. It requires the ability to summon a bright, warm memory, one rooted in happiness, love, or a positive emotion. Voldemort, on the other hand, was incapable of feeling these emotions, having been shaped by a life devoid of love and filled instead with anger, fear, and a pathological desire for power. This crucial aspect of Voldemort's character is intricately tied to his past. Born as Tom Riddle, he grew up in a loveless environment. His mother, Merope Gaunt, had been so consumed by her unrequited love for Tom Riddle Sr. that she resorted to using a love potion to make him marry her. However, when the potion wore off, Tom Sr. abandoned Merope and she died shortly after giving birth to Tom. From the moment of his birth, Voldemort was abandoned by love. This lack of a nurturing, loving connection with his parents laid the foundation for his dark soul and inability to connect with others on a human level. The Patronus, as a magical charm, is more than just a spell. It is a manifestation of a wizard's positive emotions, a symbol of their inner light. In Harry's case, the memory that enables him to summon a Patronus is the moment when his mother Lily sacrificed her life to save him. The strength of her love for him imbued him with a deep sense of protection and warmth that allowed Harry to manifest a powerful silver stag as his Patronus. Harry's Patronus was not just a spell he could perform, it was a direct reflection of the love and hope that had been instilled in him through the sacrifices made by those who loved him. Voldemort, however, lacked such a memory. As a child, he was deeply affected by his mother's abandonment and the sense of rejection from his father's refusal to accept him. As he grew older, he internalized the belief that love was a weakness, a sentiment he would carry throughout his life. In his pursuit of power, Voldemort sought to strip away his humanity, believing that in doing so he could achieve true immortality and control. His obsession with power and domination led him to reject the very things that made people human, and love, above all, was something he could not understand or accept. Rowling's explanation is clear. Without the ability to feel love or happiness, Voldemort was incapable of producing a Patronus. The spell requires a wizard to summon their happiest memory, but Voldemort had no such memory. His life had been filled with bitterness, pain, and resentment, emotions that only served to strengthen his dark powers but also hollowed him out from within. Voldemort's inability to produce a Patronus is, therefore, a representation of how far he had fallen into darkness, severing himself from the emotions that define the human experience. One of the most telling moments in the books that illustrates Voldemort's lack of humanity is his reaction to Harry's Patronus. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry first summons his Patronus to drive away the Dementors, it is the purest form of protection against evil. The Patronus is Harry's shield, a manifestation of his mother's love and the hope that he carries with him. However, Voldemort's world is one where love is seen as a weakness. The Dementors, creatures that feed on despair and hopelessness, are his allies, and they mirror the darkness inside him. His obsession with immortality and dominance makes him blind to the simple yet powerful force of love, which is the very thing that could have been his salvation. Voldemort's rejection of love extended beyond his inability to produce a Patronus. It was also the reason for his fractured relationships with others. He could not form true bonds of friendship or love because he viewed them as weaknesses. His fear of death and his belief that he could conquer it through dark magic led him to destroy those who cared for him. His closest followers, the Death Eaters, were bound to him not through loyalty born of affection or respect, but through fear. This lack of genuine human connection is reflected in his inability to summon a Patronus, a spell that requires one to reach deep inside themselves and connect with the purest of human emotions. The contrast between Harry and Voldemort is stark. While Harry's ability to summon a powerful Patronus is a sign of his connection to the love of his mother and his ability to protect others, Voldemort's inability to do so is a reflection of his deep isolation and emotional void. Even though Voldemort possessed extraordinary magical talent, it was his lack of emotional depth that made him a tragic figure, unable to reach the heights of magic that Harry and other wizards could achieve. His dark magic, while powerful, was a reflection of his inability to understand the true nature of love and the human soul. In the end, Voldemort's inability to summon a Patronus symbolizes his complete rejection of humanity. He sought to elevate himself above human emotions, believing them to be weaknesses. His fear of death led him to commit atrocities in his quest for immortality, but it also led to his downfall. Unlike Harry, who was able to harness the power of love, Voldemort was consumed by his own fears and desires. The Patronus, in its most basic form, represents the essence of human goodness, love, hope, and the ability to protect others. Voldemort, incapable of such emotions, could never master this magical art. Rowling's exploration of the Patronus spell is a powerful metaphor for the deeper themes of the Harry Potter series. The contrast between Harry and Voldemort is not just one of light versus dark magic, but of love versus fear. Harry's Patronus, a reflection of his mother's sacrifice, represents the light that can be found in the darkest of times, while Voldemort's inability to produce one highlights the destructive power of fear, hatred, and self-obsession. Through this, Rowling shows us that true power does not lie in the ability to control or dominate, but in the ability to love and protect those we care about. Voldemort's inability to summon a Patronus also serves as a reminder that power alone is not enough. His mastery over dark magic, his ability to command fear, and his overwhelming desire for control were all ultimately hollow. Despite his fearsome reputation and immense magical power, he was ultimately powerless in the face of the one thing that could have saved him: love. This is a central theme in the Harry Potter series, where love is shown to be the strongest force in the wizarding world, capable of defeating even the darkest magic. In contrast, Harry's Patronus is not just a magical feat, but a representation of his connection to the love that surrounds him. It is the manifestation of his deepest, most positive emotions, and it is this ability to love and be loved that makes Harry truly powerful. In this sense, the Patronus becomes a symbol of the ultimate triumph of good over evil, of love over fear, and of humanity over darkness. Voldemort's inability to summon a Patronus is a stark reminder of the price he paid for his rejection of these human qualities. Number 24. What happened to the Dementors after Voldemort's fall? After the fall of Lord Voldemort and the subsequent reforms in the Ministry of Magic, one burning question lingered in the minds of fans. What happened to the Dementors, the terrifying creatures that once served as the grim wardens of Azkaban? These dark entities, capable of draining the very soul of a person with their chilling kiss, had been loyal to the Dark Lord and carried out his will with a terrifying precision. Their presence had been a permanent fixture in the darkest corners of the wizarding world. The Ministry had relied heavily on them for years, even if their methods were dark and morally questionable. So, when the regime changed and the influence of Voldemort was shattered, what became of the Dementors? J.K. Rowling herself addressed this question in one of her more candid interactions with fans, confirming that the new Ministry of Magic, under the leadership of Kingsley Shacklebolt, made a decisive break. From the tradition of collaborating with the Dementors, we no longer need to rely on creatures that thrive on fear and despair, she stated. The Reformation was an essential part of the rebuilding process, as the Ministry sought to restore trust with the wizarding community and shed the remnants of the terror that Voldemort's reign had imposed on the magical world. One of the first acts of the new leadership was to expel the Dementors from their post at Azkaban. No longer would these ghastly beings be allowed to haunt the prison's stone walls, where they had previously tormented the prisoners, feeding on their fear and hopelessness. Under the careful watch of the new regime, the Ministry employed alternative means of keeping the prisoners contained. Enhanced magical wards and protective enchantments were set up to fortify the prison, making it more secure than ever before. Instead of the chilling presence of Dementors, who had long been seen as the ultimate enforcers of despair, Azkaban now relied on more humane yet equally effective methods of imprisonment. While the expulsion of the Dementors from Azkaban marked a significant step forward in the wizarding world's efforts to move past its dark history, their whereabouts remained a mystery. Rowling left it unclear where the creatures went after their banishment, offering no clear answer as to their current location. But what was made clear is that the Dementors still existed, still lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. This ambiguity surrounding their fate served as a reminder that evil cannot be entirely vanquished. It can only be forced into hiding, its hunger momentarily sated. The creatures had been expelled, but they were not destroyed, a chilling thought that resonated deeply with the implications for the future. In a broader context, the fate of the Dementors mirrors the nature of evil itself. It's not something that can be completely eradicated from existence. The Ministry may have expelled them from Azkaban, but the darkness they represented never truly vanished. Instead, it was hidden away as though sealed in a dark corner of the world, waiting for the moment when someone would be foolish enough to unlock it once more. The fact that the Dementors still existed outside the Ministry's control underscored this truth, that darkness, once unleashed, can never be fully put back into the box. The best one can hope for is to keep it at bay, to guard against its return with vigilance and caution. Interestingly, Rowling has hinted at the possibility that the Dementors may have found new ways to infiltrate the wizarding world, though they would not necessarily align themselves with any particular political faction. The creatures were not motivated by ideology, but by the promise of fear and despair. If anything, they were neutral in their malevolence, always ready to feed on the darkest emotions of human nature. This makes them all the more dangerous. Their loyalty was never to any one person, but rather to the sorrow that defined their very existence. The Ministry's decision to expel the Dementors also reflects a larger shift in how the wizarding world approached fear and power. Under Voldemort's reign, fear had been weaponized, turned into a tool of control that kept the masses in check. The Dementors were key to this system, their mere presence enough to maintain a stranglehold on the hearts and minds of the wizarding population. But with the fall of Voldemort, there was a desire for something different, something less oppressive, less reliant on terror to maintain order. The Ministry's decision to remove the Dementors from Azkaban was a symbolic step toward reclaiming autonomy and dignity for the wizarding community. Despite their expulsion, the shadows of the Dementors continue to cast a long, cold pall over the wizarding world. Their ability to drain hope and happiness from the hearts of the most powerful witches and wizards is not easily forgotten. In Harry Potter's own experiences with them, they were ever present as an embodiment of his deepest fears, his most tragic memories. The creatures served as a mirror, reflecting back to the characters their darkest thoughts and most painful moments. In this sense, the Dementors were more than just physical creatures, they were symbolic of the personal and collective struggles that each character faced in their journey toward redemption and healing. Take Harry's first encounter with the Dementor aboard the train to Hogwarts, for example. In that moment, Harry experiences firsthand the suffocating power of their presence, feeling as though he is drowning in his own memories of his parents' death. The creatures do not simply represent physical danger, but the emotional trauma that Harry carries with him. This is the true horror of the Dementors. They do not just cause harm to the body, they tear apart the soul itself. Even when Harry learned to use the Patronus charm to fend off the Dementors, the effect they had on him lingered, a reminder that certain traumas can never be fully erased. This notion of the lingering influence of the Dementors was reinforced by Rowling's decision to not fully dispose of them. Even though they were expelled from Azkaban, their existence serves as a reminder that the struggle against darkness is ongoing. It is never truly over. The Dementors remain as a symbol of the unresolved parts of human nature, the fears, the regrets, the guilt that continue to haunt the individual and the collective. By choosing not to destroy the creatures, Rowling emphasizes that there are some forces that can never be entirely defeated. They can only be contained or warded off, and the fight against them must be constant. The expulsion of the Dementors also raises important questions about the ethics of their existence. While they were undeniably agents of terror and despair, they were also a product of the magical world's darker history. In many ways, the Dementors were as much a part of that history as Voldemort himself. Their expulsion from Azkaban can be seen as a form of redemption for the magical community, a chance to move forward without the constant threat of these creatures feeding off their suffering. However, the question remains, can the wizarding world ever fully escape the legacy of fear and darkness that the Dementors embody? As long as they remain in hiding, there is always the possibility that they will resurface, more powerful and more destructive than ever before. Ultimately, Rowling's decision to leave the fate of the Dementors ambiguous speaks to a larger truth about the nature of evil and fear. It cannot be completely eradicated, but it can be confronted, contained, and resisted. The Dementors, like all manifestations of darkness, will always exist in the world, waiting for the right moment to emerge. However, the wizarding world's refusal to collaborate with them marks an important step in rejecting the use of fear as a tool of power. It is a reminder that even in the face of the greatest darkness, there is always hope, always the possibility of light. The question, then, is not whether the Dementors will return, but whether the wizarding world will be ready to face them when they do. Number 25. Why didn't Voldemort realize Harry was a Horcrux? The question of why Voldemort failed to realize that Harry was a Horcrux has baffled readers for years. This question, one that seemed almost too obvious to overlook, was answered by J.K. Rowling herself in a response that shed light on the complexities of Voldemort's character and his motivations. While many readers marveled at the fact that Voldemort, the Dark Lord who possessed immeasurable power and knowledge, couldn't perceive such an obvious connection, Rowling's explanation opened a new layer to the story of Harry Potter and Voldemort's fraught relationship. At the heart of this mystery lies the profound disconnection that Voldemort had with human emotions and love, concepts that Harry's very existence challenged. Voldemort, in his quest for power and immortality, sought to control life itself. He believed that by splitting his soul and anchoring pieces of it into objects, he could secure his everlasting existence. He meticulously planned his Horcruxes, selecting objects that held significance to him. Each piece was a calculated effort to defy death, to ensure that no force could ever destroy him. Yet, as Rowling explained, the very act of creating these Horcruxes made him so detached from the natural flow of life and magic that he inadvertently created a bond with Harry without even realizing it. Voldemort's inability to sense the part of his soul inside Harry is emblematic of his inability to understand or respect the powerful force of love. When he cast the killing curse on Harry as a baby, it wasn't merely an attempt to murder him. It was part of Voldemort's obsession with dominance over life and death. But the curse rebounded, and instead of killing Harry, it left a mark, a lightning-shaped scar over his forehead. That scar became a symbol of the bond that formed between them, but Voldemort, blind to such connections, couldn't comprehend it. Rowling explains that Voldemort never suspected that he had unintentionally created a Horcrux. For him, the process was an entirely controlled ritual. The very idea of the magic being beyond his comprehension was something he couldn't fathom. He prided himself on his intellectual superiority and power, believing that everything could be controlled and understood through sheer force of will. In his mind, his magic was the most potent force in existence, and he saw no room for the chaotic, unpredictable elements of life, like love and sacrifice, to interfere with his plans. The fact that Voldemort didn't realize Harry was a Horcrux also reveals a tragic irony. Despite all his knowledge and skill in the dark arts, he couldn't see the one thing that could truly defeat him, his own failure to understand the depths of human connection. In his quest to eradicate any form of weakness, Voldemort had become blind to the very magic that could have saved him. His soul was fractured, and this disconnection from humanity made him incapable of recognizing the importance of Harry's survival, even when it was right in front of him. Rowling's explanation highlights Voldemort's tragic flaw, his hubris and his refusal to acknowledge that he was not the master of all forces. He believed that by splitting his soul, he could control life and death, but in doing so, he severed his connection to the very thing that would have kept him whole. His belief in his own invulnerability made him blind to the fact that Harry, the very person he thought of as a mere pawn in his battle for supremacy, had become an integral part of his own soul's journey. One of the most poignant aspects of this revelation is Voldemort's disdain for love, which he considered a weakness. He often mocked those who believed in love and sacrifice, believing that such emotions had no place in his world. Yet it was precisely the love of his mother, Lily Potter, that played a pivotal role in his downfall. When Lily died protecting Harry, her love created a magical protection that Voldemort could not understand or anticipate. It was this protective love that allowed Harry to survive the curse, and ultimately it was this same love that led to Voldemort's defeat. In a world where Voldemort saw himself as above human emotions, he failed to recognize how love could be the most powerful force of all. Voldemort's failure to see the truth about Harry as a Horcrux also stems from his fundamental misunderstanding of fate and destiny. He believed that his actions alone dictated the course of events, that he could control everything and everyone. He could not fathom that a prophecy, one that was outside his control, might come to pass. The prophecy which stated that neither can live while the other survives referred to Harry and Voldemort. But Voldemort, in his arrogance, believed that he could avoid it. He thought that if he killed Harry, the prophecy would be nullified. What he failed to realize, however, was that the prophecy was not just a prediction of death, but a reflection of the unbreakable bond between him and Harry, a bond that Voldemort himself had unknowingly created. Harry, in many ways, represents everything Voldemort despises. He is the living embodiment of sacrifice, love, and the willingness to fight for others. In contrast, Voldemort's entire existence is centered around self-preservation and power. Harry's willingness to die for his friends and the world around him was a concept that Voldemort could never understand. For Voldemort, the idea of sacrificing oneself for others was anathema to his very existence. This stark contrast between their characters is what ultimately led to Harry's survival and Voldemort's demise. Throughout the series, we see how Voldemort's inability to comprehend love and sacrifice leads to his downfall. His obsession with control and immortality blinds him to the deeper, more profound aspects of magic and life. He is so focused on conquering death that he cannot see that true strength lies in the ability to accept mortality and the love of others. His inability to recognize Harry as a Horcrux is not just a tactical mistake, but a reflection of his own weakness, a weakness that he refused to acknowledge. Voldemort's failure also serves as a commentary on the nature of evil. In the end, Voldemort's greatest enemy was not Harry's lightning bolt scar or the prophecy, but his own inability to understand the things that make people human: love, sacrifice, and selflessness. He viewed these as weaknesses, not realizing that they were the very things that gave Harry the strength to survive and ultimately defeat him. In the final battle, it wasn't Harry's magic that defeated Voldemort, but the love and loyalty of those who stood by him. In a way, Voldemort's downfall is inevitable from the start. His quest for immortality through the creation of Horcruxes, while initially successful, was ultimately his undoing. By splitting his soul, he severed his connection to humanity, and in doing so, he made himself vulnerable to a mistake that would cost him everything. His refusal to understand love and sacrifice made him blind to the very thing that could have saved him. The unbreakable bond between him and Harry, a bond that in the end proved to be Voldemort's undoing. Harry's scar, a symbol of Voldemort's failure, represents the final irony of their connection. Voldemort, who believed he was invincible, could not foresee that the very magic he sought to control would be the thing that led to his defeat. The lightning-shaped scar, a reminder of the curse that Voldemort cast, also symbolizes the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. It was through this love that Harry survived and ultimately triumphed over Voldemort, proving that the greatest power in the world is not the ability to control life and death, but the ability to love and sacrifice for others. This understanding of Voldemort's failure to recognize Harry as a Horcrux provides a deeper insight into his character and his tragic flaw. His belief in his own invincibility, his disdain for love, and his refusal to accept that there are forces greater than himself were all factors that contributed to his downfall. It is a poignant reminder that no matter how powerful one may be, the true strength lies not in control, but in love, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up for others. Number 26. Why did Hermione choose Ron instead of Harry? The question has been a long-standing point of fascination for Harry Potter fans around the world. Why did Hermione Granger choose Ron Weasley over Harry Potter? This dilemma has been posed since the very first book, as readers watch the trio grow together in their magical world. The decision, however, is not as straightforward as it may seem. J.K. Rowling herself, in one of her many interviews, revealed that, while she knew that Harry and Hermione would be the ideal couple in the conventional sense, the dynamics of the story demanded something more complex, something that spoke to human imperfection and growth. Harry, of course, was the protagonist, the hero of the saga. He was the one who carried the weight of the wizarding world on his shoulders, burdened by the prophecy and his destined battle with Voldemort. Hermione, equally formidable, was the intellect of the trio, the planner, the one who always had the right book or spell to get them out of trouble. Their partnership would have seemed perfect to any outsider. Harry and Hermione were both strong, intelligent, and accomplished, traits that would have made them a natural pairing. But according to Rowling, this was not the path their characters were meant to follow. Hermione, despite her intelligence, was not looking for someone who matched her in every way. She wasn't searching for a partner who was as powerful or as driven as Harry. Instead, she was looking for someone who could accept her for who she was, flaws and all. She didn't need another hero. She needed someone who could see past her intellect and strength, someone who valued her for her. Humanity. Ron Weasley, in his own awkward, sometimes brash way, was the one who gave her that. As the story progressed, it became clear that Ron, though often self-deprecating and unsure of himself, had a deep admiration for Hermione. He saw her as someone who was out of his league in many ways, yet he treated her as an equal. He wasn't intimidated by her intellect, nor was he consumed by jealousy of her success. Unlike Harry, who was often preoccupied with saving the world or confronting his destiny, Ron was present in the moment, appreciating the quiet moments with Hermione, moments that weren't about grand adventures or dangerous missions, but simply about being there for each other. It was in these moments, far from the magical battles, that Hermione found a sense of balance and acceptance that she didn't experience with Harry. This connection between Ron and Hermione is most evident during moments of emotional vulnerability. In the Goblet of Fire, for instance, when Ron grows jealous over Hermione's budding friendship with Victor Crumb, it's clear that his feelings for her run deep. Despite his insecurities about his own worth compared to the impressive Quidditch player, Ron still values Hermione in a way that is grounded in admiration rather than rivalry. His emotions, though complicated by jealousy, show a genuine affection for her that isn't driven by competition or the need to be the chosen one. There is also the issue of the balance between Harry and Hermione's personalities. They were, in many ways, two alike. Both Harry and Hermione had a sense of duty and responsibility that overshadowed many aspects of their personal lives. They were both driven by a need to solve problems and protect those they loved, sometimes to the detriment of their own well-being. While this was admirable, it also made their relationship difficult. They were both so similar in their ambition and need to succeed that they would have struggled to maintain the necessary support for one another without falling into competition. Ron, on the other hand, brought something to the relationship with Hermione that Harry couldn't. Ron's role was to keep things grounded, to inject a sense of humor and light-heartedness into their otherwise intense world. His ability to laugh at himself, his willingness to fail and try again, was something that Hermione admired in him. While Hermione was often the voice of reason, the planner, Ron was the one who could make her laugh, who didn't take life too seriously despite his family's struggles. This dynamic gave Hermione the space to be herself, to relax into the relationship without the pressure of always having to be the smartest or the best. J.K. Rowling's insight into this pairing comes from a place of understanding human relationships. In her view, Hermione needed someone who could complement her, not someone who was her intellectual equal or someone who shared her every value. Hermione needed a partner who could challenge her, yes, but also someone who allowed her to grow into her full self. Ron, despite his imperfections, gave her this. He was not afraid of her intellect or strength. Instead, he embraced it. In the end, it was Ron's acceptance and unconditional love that won Hermione over. It was a love built on years of friendship, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. This bond between Ron and Hermione was not without its struggles. There were moments of misunderstanding, jealousy, and even deep emotional pain, but the beauty of their relationship lay in their ability to work through those issues. Ron and Hermione's relationship wasn't easy, but it was real. They didn't need to be perfect together. They simply needed to be there for each other when it mattered most. This was what set their relationship apart from that of Harry and Hermione. While Harry and Hermione might have made an ideal match in terms of intellect and heroism, Ron and Hermione's relationship was built on a foundation of true emotional connection, imperfections, and acceptance. In contrast, Harry's relationship with Ginny Weasley, though perhaps surprising to some readers, was also rooted in emotional understanding and mutual growth. Ginny was not interested in Harry as a hero. She had admired him from a distance, but over time she saw him for who he truly was, not just the chosen one, but a person with his own flaws, fears, and needs. Ginny accepted Harry for who he was, and in turn, Harry was able to open up to her in ways that he never could with Hermione. Their relationship, like Ron and Hermione's, was built on mutual respect and emotional support, rather than intellectual competition or grand heroics. At the heart of Hermione's choice to be with Ron was her desire for a relationship grounded in balance. She didn't need to compete with her partner. She needed someone who accepted her vulnerabilities, her imperfections, and who could make her laugh when life became too overwhelming. Ron, with all his faults, was the one who could do that for her. He offered a balance to her world, just as she offered a balance to his. Together they became a team that could weather the storm of their tumultuous world. It wasn't about finding the perfect partner, it was about finding someone who made her feel complete. In Ron, Hermione found that person. So, while Harry and Hermione might have seemed like the perfect couple on paper, it was Ron who truly complemented Hermione's soul. Their relationship was not built on perfection, but on real, flawed, and beautiful moments of growth, acceptance, and love. It wasn't about being the smartest or the most heroic. It was about finding someone who truly saw you for who you were and who loved you for it. And that, in the end, was what made Ron and Hermione the right match.